Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Building Great-Looking XPages Applications. Today we'll be presenting Teamstudio and TLCC on XPages Applications, with TLCC really doing the educational component and the majority of the talking here. My name is Colleen Badrikian. I'm the Marketing Director at Teamstudio. I'm just going to do a brief overview and give some instructions here. Basically, our presentation will take about an hour and a half of your time here, the focus being on building great-looking XPages applications. If you like what you hear and want to share it with others, please tweet about this event using the hashtag XPages, and also mention us at Teamstudio and at TLCC Ltd. So, moving on here. As I mentioned, I'm from Teamstudio. I'm the marketing director there, and today presenting with me will be Dan Colbert. He'll do an overview of Teamstudio, who we are and what we do, just for your reference, before getting into the heart of this presentation, which is the building XPages component. With that being said, I'm going to pass along or give the microphone here to Dan Colbert to do the brief overview of Teamstudio. Dan?
Thank you very much, Colleen. I appreciate that introduction, and welcome to everyone. Thank you for your participation and attendance today. As Colleen mentioned, I'm going to just run through a couple of slides, not only to welcome you, but also to kick off our exciting webinar series here in 2013 with TLCC. As a background to Teamstudio, I'm sure the company and some of the products need no introduction for some of our attendees. And for those who may not be familiar, Teamstudio has really been a strong partner with the IBM Lotus Notes and Domino platform going back many years, and are the authors of the predominant source code control system for development within Notes and Domino applications, the Chow system, Build Manager, and some of our developer productivity tools like Analyzer, Configurator, Delta, etc., have been major factors and a big help for many of you in building your applications over the years. So with that said, we have continued to evolve with the platform and with the technology that goes along with it, and our tools and products are now supporting XPages and custom controls. So as you absorb and soak in the content today, we hope that we can also help you in your XPages development efforts with our products. We've also, over the past few years, begun to really jump into the mobile application and mobile development space, as not only XPages and web development, but also mobile applications have become in demand with our clients. So Teamstudio Unplugged, in addition to our core development product suite of Notes and Domino, we also, as I mentioned, have put a lot of time and effort into designing a platform that allows you to use the skills that you already have and that you'll learn more about today with Howard and Paul's content for building these XPages applications and being able to easily extend them out to mobile devices. So Unplugged will give you the ability to create that on-device, that native application feel by using your core XPages development skills. So for those of you lucky enough to be at Connect next week, we will be there as presenters at booth B36 and 37, and be happy to introduce more information about Teamstudio to you there. So without further ado, I know we've got some great material. As I said, we're kicking off an ongoing series here in 2013. So I'll go ahead and pass the mic over to our presenters and enjoy the webinar today.
Okay, so in 1 second here, we'll share our screen with Paul here.
Actually, can you pass that over to Howard, Kayleen?
Absolutely. So Howard, You should now have presentation rights. Just let me know when you do and we can continue.
I do, and hopefully if you can confirm you're seeing my screen.
I'm able to see your screen.
That is great. Okay, well, I'm Howard Greenberg. I'm one of the partners here at TLCC, and Paul, my partner, is going to also be presenting today. Say hello, Paul.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so we're really pleased to be doing this webinar today with Teamstudio. They're actually one of the few companies, I think, that have been around in the Notes and Domino marketplace longer than we have. So I think that says a lot for Teamstudio, that they've been a strong player in the marketplace for developer tools for Notes and Domino, and so I think it's a great combination. We are planning on doing more webinars this year, and we will post the schedule to www.tlcc.com/xpages-webinar. And also, if you want to see some of the previous webinars, we do have a link on that page to a listing of a bunch of webinars we did in the last 2 years that are up on YouTube. So the link to those previous webinars is on that XPages-webinar, and then from there you can go to YouTube and view those sessions. A little bit about TLCC for those of you who are not familiar with us. We've been around since 1997 doing self-paced courses for Notes and Domino. And we're really, really excited about our new course that we just came out with. It's basically where the material you're going to hear today came from. It's a 4-day self-paced course on using a lot of the controls from the extension library and the Upgrade Pack 1 and what's soon to be built into Notes 9 to build a good-looking XPages application. If you're new to XPages, we also have an Intro to XPages development course that has a great price. It's free, and so hopefully most of you on this webinar are a little more experienced because this is a little more advanced webinar. But if you are new and you're wondering how to get started with XPages, try out that free course. There's no obligation or anything. We have a JavaScript course for those of you who don't know JavaScript, and then we have our 2 core XPages courses. And we have a mobile XPages course that uses mobile controls from the extension library to teach you how to build a mobile application, and a Java course as well. Our courses are self-paced, so you can learn anywhere, and we do have instructor help via an integrated discussion database. We can also deliver our courses instructor-led. We can do that online, or we can come to your site and do a private class. And finally, we also offer mentoring services where we can come out and help you build your applications or understand, XPages a little better. Okay, so I'm really excited about our new course, so I have to show it off a little. This is it. We have 7 modules in it, and we kind of introduce some of the tools in Module 1. In Module 2, we cover some of the controls you can use to build dynamic content. One of these we're going to talk about today, the form table control, but there's a number of other controls you can use to display images, to display views, to have dynamic content on an XPage that can be switched very quickly. We have a module on the various dojo controls so you can add really cool spinners and sliders and neat ways to select dates and times and links and all sorts of things that you can do with Dojo. Again, that's all from the extension library. We have a whole module on doing different types of dialogues. Paul's going to demonstrate some of these later on. Dialog control, value pickers, name pickers, tooltips, and in-place form control. And Paul's going to also talk about the data view control. In the course, we go into a lot more detail on this. And we have a whole module on different types of navigation controls and how to set those up. And finally, we get a module that kind of pulls it all together and shows some of the different design strategies you can use when building your XPages applications using the application layout control. So it's a really great course. Really excited about it, and we do have it on sale. You can save $300 through the end of the month. So that's all I'll say about that for now. We are going to take your questions at the end, but in the meantime, the way we're going to do questions is you can type those into the Q&A pane in your WebEx interface. If you don't see the Q&A pane at the bottom, that's that graphic at the bottom, go to the top of the screen to the WebEx interface and click on Q&A, and then you'll get the Q&A panel. Now we're going to respond to your questions verbally. So you will type in your questions, you won't ask them verbally, but Paul and I will take your questions verbally, and you know, anything XPages related is okay, but we're going to give a priority to the questions related to what we're covering in the webinar. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, first get into just a little background about what you need to have to do some of the controls we're going to talk about, as well as some very important terminology regarding facets. Then we're going to talk about 3 controls today: the form table control, the data view control, and the application layout control. So what do you need? What you need is one of 2 things in terms of your Domino systems. You need either 853, both designer and the server. And if you're running 853, you need to have either the Upgrade Pack 1 or the Extension Library. So what's the difference between those? Upgrade Pack 1 actually was built from the Extension Library back in December of 2011. And it is an IBM-supported official IBM product that you can get, you know, report bug fixes and get help on from IBM. And you would download it from wherever you download your IBM software that you purchased. For business partners, that's Partner World. For customers, that's Passport Advantage. And it is a subset of what was in the Extension Library back in December of 2011. Now, one of the drawbacks is that it hasn't been updated since then, so any bug fixes or any new controls are not present in that. Now, the Extension Library, on the other hand, is available on the OpenNTF.org website, and that's updated fairly regularly, and that has a lot more functionality to it because of these frequent updates. For example, over the course of last year, they added controls for social tools like interfacing with Facebook and connections and things like that, and they enhanced most of the controls in there throughout the year. So it's a little more updated, but again, it's not IBM supported. This is open access software. Now, if you're going to start using Notes and Domino 9, right now it's in beta, the superset of the Upgrade Pack 1 is included in Notes and Domino 9. So you're not going to have everything that's in the Extension Library. Some of the tools, like the relational controls, aren't there, but everything we're going to talk about today is in the beta, built in. You don't have to do anything extra or need anything extra. So that's a big advantage. Okay, so now one important terminology that you need to know is something called facets. So Paul's going to spend a few minutes explaining this terminology that everyone who develops XPages should know what that is and how that affects your XPages development. Paul, you ready?
Yep, you can pass over the presentation to me. Testing, testing. Can everyone hear me?
We hear you fine, and I will hopefully am passing control over to you. Am I? Presenter. Hold on. Okay. You should have it now. And we see your designer screen.
All right. Well, let's drop into notes very quickly. Howard introduced our Rapid XPages development course. We deliver that in Notes databases. Just want to show you that there's quite a few activity databases that we're going to be working with for the demonstrations today. 3 of these are data sources. So we have a customers application which has various views in it, you know, for showing our customer information, and we have our sales database. That's where our sales orders go in for our various customer, and our parts database. So we've manufactured this Big Oak company and some data that we use to perform the demonstrations. Most of the demonstrations will be coming out of this Workbench database, which you can see in the background in Designer, and some from some other databases. We'll get into this application layout database where we bring it all together. We bring together designs of form tables, data views, and application layouts. Okay, so here in Designer, first thing I want to do is just go over some terminology, and I'm going to use this demonstration XPage right now. And on this XPage, I have a custom control, which has defined on it an application layout. We'll talk about that later. And in the middle facet area, there's two buttons. One is a core button, and one is a dojo button, okay, one of those extension library controls. So if I jump over to the source, here's what I see. I see that in the start view tag for the XPage, I can see the namespace definition for my core controls because I have some of those on here. I've got a core panel control, XP. I've got a core button control, XP button. And I can see the namespace definition for custom controls. I have one of those on here, XC. Every custom control added to this XPage will start off with the tag, open tag, XC : and then the actual name of the custom control. And since I also have one of the extension library controls, this one here, the dojo button control, its namespace tags will always begin with XE. Now, this part here, facets, we're going to be talking a lot about facets. Facets are used in your form table design, your data view design, and obviously in your application layout design. Basically, a facet is a named area in your design. And a good way to demonstrate that is to take a look at this XPage, which, there's not a lot to it. We've got a core view panel control on this XPage. And it's got one pager right now, and if I jump into the source, here's what I'm actually seeing here. I'm seeing, in the facets, I'm seeing a little bit more than I wanted to see. Let me move some things around. Bear with me one moment. Okay, here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing on this XPage, I'm seeing one computed field control at the top, and I'm seeing a view panel, and that has one pager defined. And if I look at the source, I'm also seeing, within this view panel, in the facets property for that view panel, I'm seeing, one pager defined, and it has this special property, XP key equals header pager. So even your view panel control has facets. The interface for this, you're probably more familiar with. I'm just selecting that in Designer on the Display tab, and just selecting that here. Now let me switch to my source, and I'll show a pager in the footer as well. And my facets have changed. Okay, so now there are, in fact, two facets on this view panel. Okay, we've got a pager facet, which is located specifically in this area, in this defined facet area. XP key equals header pager, and the one that I just added has this property, XP key footer pager. So the XP key property basically defines the location, which facet area this particular control is going to occupy. And if I take a look at that in Design, I now have my pager control, my second pager control in the footer, and I can preview that. And now I see two pagers. Now, with my new understanding of facets, what I should be able to do is take this computed field control, which is right now out of my view design, it's above it, and move it into one of these facet areas. So let me try that. I'm going to try to move that into the footer facet. So to do that, switching over to my source. And first of all, I'm going to comment out. A little bit too much, this pager. Okay, and I'm just going to grab from my source my computed field, and I'm going to move it somewhere inside of my facets. Okay, so now within my facets, I have one computed field, and I've got one pager. Now, this was already added, but that typically wouldn't be defined, that property, for a computed field, but you can add in the property to indicate which particular facet on this view panel to locate that computed field. And when I look at that in Designer, I don't actually see my computed field rendered in Designer, but if I preview my page now, in fact, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing this computed field, which is simply returning now's date and time, and that's in my footer facet for this view panel. Okay. So why did we go through all that? Well, Howard's going to start off talking to the form table control. I'll be following up with the data view control and the application layout control, and all of these controls have a lot of facets. Now, the way these visualize themselves in Designer is these large green dots. So you're used to working with these editable areas, not a user editable area, not a user input control. This is a design editable area. So some controls have optional design areas, facets, where you can customize their design. So when adding a form table, there are in fact 3 facet areas. There's a header facet area, this unnamed facet area in the middle for adding form rows, and a footer facet area where a couple of buttons have already been added. And this is the result of completing this form table design. You know, we see 4 form rows to capture the name of the person's first name, last name, and their email. In the footer, a couple of buttons have been added to submit or cancel the entry. And the header facet is unused in this case. And if we take a look at that form table in the source, you know, it starts on line 8 and it ends on line 36. And here, highlighted, between 22 and 35 are the facets for that form table. Only one, the panel facet that was added, and then 2 buttons within there. Now, for any named facet, like a footer facet or a header facet, you can only have one direct child facet, and that's the one that gets this special XP key indicating the location or the name of the facet. So you simply drag in a panel. If you want multiple buttons, you're going to have to drag in some sort of container control, a panel, a div. You drag in your panel into the desired facet location. It automatically gets that property, XP key, with the facet name. And then into that, you would drag in however many other controls or components that you want to add. For those other form row components that were added into this unnamed facet, those are added directly as childs directly to the control that they were added to. So in the case of a form table control, any control added into its one unnamed facet, you can only have one, is basically a child of that control. So we can see them, you know, right after the start tag for the form table. You know, one form row for the first name, for the last name, or the form row. So for unnamed facets, add as many controls as you like, and they're just going to be in between the start and the end tag. And with that, Howard, I think you can take over and give us a little bit more detail on that form table.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So the form table, I'm just going to go through the slides real quick and then we'll jump into Designer. The form table is a way to present your labels and controls to either display or input data in a nice row and column format. You can see a little picture on the screen. Now, one thing to note is that to display this properly, you need to use a theme that is based on the OneUI version 2 theme. Otherwise, it won't look quite right. It'll have like a white background instead of a gray background, and the spacing won't be quite right. So you do need the OneUI v2 theme, or you need to extend that theme. And we're going to talk a little more about themes later on. So the form table, in addition to looking real nice, it also has some neat built-in validation. So typically, when you first start off with XPages, you're adding a display errors or display error control. You would use a display errors control to sum up all your validation errors. In a display error control, you would add one for each control to display a particular validation error next to the control that the user was inputting information in. You don't have to do that with the form table. It's all built in. So you don't have to add the display errors or display error controls. They're all just enabled, that functionality. The way we're going to add the form table is under the extension library palette. You drag over the form table, and you can set some of the properties. And then from there, you're going to add rows to the form table. So there is another control called the form layout control, and you would drag and drop that into the middle unnamed facet. Okay, so as Paul just mentioned, you can add as many things there as you want. So you can add multiple rows to that facet. Now notice the header and footer have a label, so we can only add one control to those. But it can be a panel control that has multiple controls in it. Once you do that, you will then put in your controls the user is going to use to input in the information, in this case an edit box, but it can be a list box, combo box, anything you want. And then you're going to give the row a label, and the label is what the user is going to see. So you don't have to use a label control if you don't want to. The form row in the form table control will handle the labels for you. And then in the header and the footer, probably in the footer, you can add some buttons to handle the navigation. A button to save, a button to go into edit mode, a button to cancel, whatever you want to do. Okay, so let's jump over to Designer. Actually, let's first go to the browser and see how this looks like. So this is, if you just started out in XPages, and even let's say if you took our first XPages course, we kind of teach you to design in XPages kind of like this, where you use the label controls and the input controls like the edit box or a drop down for the state in this case. And if we have any validation, we can use, in this case, a display errors control to display that validation message. Now the form table has the same functionality, but as you can see, it looks a lot nicer, and we have some upfront information here. We have a label and some other information that we can put in, and if we go in and edit this and have a validation issue, it will display our validation messages both at the top, and will also display a message right above the control that has the validation issue. And if we were creating a new document with this XPage, actually I don't have that link set up right, but we'll see how that works in a second. So how do we build this? Let me start with a XPage that has using just a table. Now the reason I am starting with this is because many of you might have already discovered that if you go to the Data tab and you select a bunch of fields that were on your document and you drag and drop that over to your X page, that you will get a nice table with the label controls already created and edit box controls already created, and now we would just have to go in and create, set up our validation, but all these are already bound to our data sources. So that's a terrific time saver. And in this case, this developer in this particular X page did that. Let me delete that. So we have this already set up, these controls already set up with validation, and they're bound to our data, appropriate data source and the appropriate fields on that Domino data source. And we also have our buttons here. So we'll just use this as a starting point. Now if we're going to create the form table, we'll go to the extension library. We'll drag and drop over our form table. And you see that we get our header and our footer facets. Those are labeled. And we have this center area. Okay. First, let's give it a title. And we can give it a description. And you see how that information appears in those static text areas right up below the header. We don't have to use the header. We don't have to use the footer. But what we're going to want to do now is add some rows. And let's just start off with 3 here. So I'll put in some rows right in that center facet. Okay. Now in each row, I have a label facet, and we have an unnamed facet to the right of that, the rightmost facet. And that is where I want to add things like my edit box. So I'll put that in that control there, and then I would go through and set up my binding to whatever field I want, in this case the first name, and I could set up my validation and put in, enter the first name, whatever I want. Okay, now in the row itself, I need to give it a label. So if I click on the row, you see that we have a label here for first name. Okay, so I can put that first name in, and to save time, I'm just going to drag and drop these other controls from the controls I already had set up, and the only thing I have to do is go in and add a label. This is the last name. And then we have the address. Okay, and to save time, I already have a panel down here. And so I'm going to just drag and drop that panel to my footer facet. And let's go see what this looks like in Designer, or I should say in a browser. So you see that I got my rows. I got a submit button. And if I click the submit button, I get some validation errors, and the validation errors appear in a summary at the top and also appear above each control or above each row. Notice that these 3 labels have an asterisk in front of it to indicate they're required. Designer or XPages put that there automatically because it saw that we had validation set up, that we said it was required. And you can turn that off if you want. And as a matter of fact, I may not want to have the validation messages appear in both places, so I can disable the summary, those messages at the top. Okay, so while I'm here, let me also add a column. So under the extension library, let's go ahead and finish this off. I can add a column. And into that column, I can drag my 3 rows. And then I can add another column. Let's add 2 more, actually, to have a 3-column setup. And then I'll add some more rows to this middle column. I'll put 3 rows in that middle one, and let's put 2 more in this one at the bottom, or the rightmost column. Okay, and so now I just need to go add my rest of my controls over. We can drag and drop the city over to here, and we can take the state, put it in, the zip code we'll put there, the phone we'll put here, and the email we'll put here. And so that's actually probably all I need this table for. I'll delete the table and come in real quick and put in my labels. This is for the city. This is my state. And this is my zip and phone. And last but not least, email. Okay, so that's basically it. I can go ahead and preview this and see what it looks like. Oops. Let's see, what didn't we get here? Let's preview it from here. Make sure I got the right URL. Okay, so I seem to have a little bit of a problem. Probably something didn't get in the right place, so let's just go look and make sure we got our column here. We got our three rows set up in our rows, and we end our row. And here's the problem, is that we don't have an ending form column. So I probably have a form column out of place, so let's go find that and cut it. Yeah, so right here we have two ending form column tags. Again, sometimes it's easier to do some of this in Designer because
I think he meant in the source.
In source, yeah. In Designer, in the source. Thank you, Paul. And let's see if that renders correctly now. Okay, so now we have our columns, and my validation messages appear. And if I open something up in read mode, you see that we're, still everything appears. And if I go into edit mode, we can, switch into edit mode and get the various input fields. Okay, Paul, I think it's up to you for the data view.
Okay, if you can pass over the presenter control.
You got it.
Let me know when you're seeing my screen.
You're seeing your notes client right now.
Okay. All right, so here in Designer, let's take a look at this particular demo X page, 511 view. And on this X page, I have a data view control. Now there's a whole bunch of other clutter around here too. We deliver all of our demonstrations inside of an application layout control on a custom control. So all of these demos you're going to see, if you take a look at the outline, something called CC Demo Layout. So that's our custom control where we added the application layout control for our demonstrations. We'll get to that later. But we have a data view control. And if I take a look at the data properties for that, it is bound to a domino view in another application, in actually this customer's application. And specifically, it's bound to the customer by name view. Now, if I scroll down into this design, I also see a standard view panel control bound to the exact same customer by name view. When I render this, when I preview this in the browser, no, that's what I'm seeing. Okay, so I'm seeing the same view, my customer by name view, in your view panel control and in a data view control. And what are the differences? Well, certainly there are some design differences. These links, they appear differently. The extra columns, they're formatted or aligned on the right, whereas extra columns in a view panel are on the left. There are more areas for pagers. So, in addition to top right and bottom right, there's some other areas, and in fact, other pages. So these are some other pages that are available to me through the extension library. So we'll cover those as well. So different styling. You may have noticed these little chevrons on the right to expand or collapse the detail row. Okay, so you can have a detail row to provide additional information for that particular view entry in the data view. Okay, so let's take a look at that in design. Actually, let's jump into the presentation just for a moment. In Designer, and this is a less cluttered design, so we don't have the application layout custom control added here. So we're just seeing a data view, and we see a lot of these green dots. I actually presented our Rapid Application Development course a couple of weeks back at a customer site, and folks were quite intimidated by those green dots, and they said we should have called this webinar, don't be afraid of the green dot. So green dot, it's an editable area. It's a facet area. So some of these are named facets. Well, in fact, in the data view, they're all named facets. So there are named facets 6 for adding pager control. So you can add pager top left, pager top right, and so on. Some of these pages have been added. Some of these are there waiting with a green dot for you to add in another pager. There's a facet area for a summary column. There's a facet area for the detail row, okay, where we saw that address information. So some of the design of the data view is by adding components into the various facet areas, and some is by setting properties as you would with a view panel control and complex properties as well. So here are, in the alt properties for my data view, some properties that we're probably familiar with, like the open docs as read-only is set to true, and the number of rows to display is set to 10. And the var variable is set to view entry, basically a variable to address each view entry within my Domino view data source, and so on. And then some of these properties, like the summary column, where we're seeing the link to actually open up the customer, those are defined as complex properties, properties with properties, things like the the summary column, and also the extra columns where we saw the phone and contact information. The procedure for creating a data view, from the extension library folder, drag in a data view, and just like you would defining a view panel control, specify a Domino view data source, so it can be in the current database or an other database, and then specify the view. By default, the data source name will be view 1, just as it would be for a view panel control. Set the properties like var and number of rows and open docs as open docs read only in the alt properties. For properties like your summary column, where we saw that customer name, you add a summary column. We'll see this in Designer. For extra columns, you add the complex extra columns. On the Data View tab in the properties, you can specify which XPage, the page name property, which XPage to open when one of those view entries is clicked in the summary column. And also, you would add in your pager controls simply by dragging them into the desired facet area. For that detail row, where we saw the customer address information, basically you drag content into that detail facet. That's a named facet, so if you wanted multiple computed fields, you need a container control here, and that's what I'm seeing here. That dotted line is a panel or a div control. And in this case, only one computed field was added in, and it's using that view entry variable, view entry get column value, to return the city. Now, for address and state, since those are not defined within columns in my Domino view data source, there's an extra stop. So from the view entry, we're getting the document, the underlying document for that view entry, and then getting the item value for either the address or the state. Okay, so let's take a look at that in Designer. Okay, and this is the wrong X page. Okay, we've got a pair of X pages here. The view X pages, anything that ends in a view is for displaying a Domino view, input for displaying Domino documents. And if I take a look at this data view that was added into this middle area, we can see on the Data tab, it's Data Source, Customer by Name View, and the Customer Application. On the Data View tab, we can see which X page to open when a document is clicked, when a view entry is clicked. And in the All Properties, that's where you would define, in addition to your typical properties, like your var property and number of rows and open docs as read-only, under the Format category, that's where you add your summary column. And if I expand this, I can see that the summary column is displaying the customer column from the view data source. So let's take a look at the design of that view data source. And it's in our customers application. Here's our customer by name view. So I'm looking at it in Designer. It has a customer column, and the properties for that show me that the title is customer, but in fact on the Advanced tab, the programmatic name or the addressable name for that column is customer, and for this one it's city and contact and phone and so on. This one here, used for some sort of a DB lookup, has a programmatic name of $2. So if I wanted to address this programmatically, that's its address. That's its identity. Okay. So back to my design, summary column. We simply specify the name of the column. For extra columns, what we saw on the right, let's preview this quickly. Now this has two extra columns, contact and phone number. So those are defined here by adding extra columns, and one of these is displaying for a column name phone, and this one contact. And these ones also have titles. Okay, so I'm going to actually create this from scratch. And to do that, I'm actually just going to jump into the course and run this activity. Okay, so if you're familiar with TLCC courses, we typically have a demonstration X page where we show you what you're going to do, and here's a little tip, leave this open as you're performing the activity. So I want to recreate this data view to the customer by name view. Okay, a couple of pagers in the top left and top right, and showing, in addition to the customer name, contact and phone number, and also a detail row. So to do that, I'll just push this button to open the appropriate X page that I'll be designing. And here it is. And the first step is from the Extension Library folder, drag in a data view. And this is to another database. So let me navigate to that customer's database. And specify the customer by name view for my data source. Okay, and I can see all of the green dots for adding pagers and for adding a detail row and so on. Now, first thing I want to do is in the on the Data View tab, at runtime, the X page to open, and the one that is advised is the Activity X page 5.1 input, so let me grab that one. These are not as easy to find in this interface, so I'm just going to select anyone for now. Well, let's get an input. And then I'll modify that in the All Properties. Okay, on the Data tab, I can see my Domino View data source, and in the All Properties, I'm going to set some of those properties for my data view. Things like the proper page name. And this interface seems a little bit, not sure why. That's the same property, the page name property, but here they're listed in alphabetical order, so let me scroll down to that 51 input. Well, we really do have a lot of X pages in that workbench. And there it is, okay? So that's my page name, or the X page to use when a view entry is clicked on. And then I might also want to provide a var variable, like view entry, to address each view entry, and the number of rows that I want to display, maybe 10, and open docs is read-only, set that to true. And under the Format section in my All Properties is where I would add a summary column. So I would push this button to add a summary column, and then specify, at a minimum, the column name. And I will get it. Okay, so that is the programmatic column name for that customer column. And let's see what I get. I'm going to go ahead and just preview this. And I'm getting my customer column. Don't have any extra columns, don't have any pagers. So if I compare that to this demonstration activity page, and I need a couple of pagers, going to need some extra columns for the contact and phone number. So let's work on those parts of the design. Okay, for pagers, just going to go with the core pager controls, and I'm going to mix it up and put them in the bottom left and bottom right facets. And then for the extra columns, okay, I add them here to this property. So into this complex property, I'm going to add a couple of extra columns. And things got a little out of whack. So I'm going to close this and reopen that. I've seen this before. I think it was this one. And I think I was here. Yeah, there, that's a little better. Yeah, I've seen that before where for some reason these plus and minus buttons become inactive. So I'm adding 2 extra columns, one for the contact, and maybe give that a column title of contact, and one for the phone. And give that a name of phone as well. Okay, so let's preview those changes. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing some pagers added to the appropriate top and bottom right facet areas. I'm seeing my extra columns. I'm not seeing those column titles. So let's see where to set those. So kind of like your view panel, we've got this display options area where I can show column titles. And while I'm here, I might as well indicate that I can collapse the details row, which I'm going to build next. So to add a details row, you add something into the detail facet. And I like to start out with a container control. That is a named facet area, so only one main child control. So I'll add in a panel, and into that, I'm going to add a computed field. And I'm going to compose or compute that computed field to return some information from the view entry. So my addressable variable that I defined was view entry, so I can do a view entry, get column value, and specify the city column to return. Okay, I know that there was a city column. There wasn't an address or state column in my Domino View data source, but that one I can get, so let's see if that works. Let me just save that. And back in my browser, I'll refresh. A couple of things. I am seeing those titles right now, and if the underlying column is sortable, you'll see that on your data view control, just as you would on a view panel control. Also seeing these chevrons to expand or collapse the details, and seeing, in fact, the contents of that particular column, my city column. So that's working for me. If I want to get the state, then I have to drop in and make a change to my formula. And let me see if I can just borrow that. Not quite right. Borrowed a little bit too much. Okay, so to get the contents of any field underlying or any field in the underlying document, view entry, get document, get item value string, and then specify the name of the field. Okay, so I'll make that change. Let me save it, compile it, refresh. And that's where I'm seeing that additional content. So there's a lot that you can do in that detail row to display information from the underlying document or from any column for the view entry. Okay, a couple of other things while we're here to explore, a couple of other properties, and one property for the data view that's kind of interesting in the format area is this one here, multi-column count. I'm going to set that to 2 and save that. And let me refresh my design. And there's the impact. Okay, so now I'm seeing 2 columns for my data view. So my 10 rows, which I specified in the rows property, are now split between my 2 columns. And you can set that to 3 columns, 4 columns, or the default, which is 1 column. Now, if you're going to do that, personally, I think it gets a little bit confusing with the extra columns. So I think that in that application, where you're setting multiple columns, it's best to stick with a summary column and a detail row and not have any extra columns. But again, that's just a personal preference. So I'm going to set that back to the default, which is 1 or nothing. And one other thing to explore while we're here, and that is some of the other pages that are available to you through the extension library. So in my extension library area, in my custom or in my controls, there are things like pager add rows and pager expand collapse for expanding and collapsing a categorized view, and so on. So let's try out some of these. Well, this is an interesting one. Pager show hide details. So I do have a detail row, so that's to show or hide the details. And let's take a look at this pager sizes as well. Okay, and maybe we'll get rid of that regular core pager and try a pager add rows here. And let's save that and refresh. Okay, and I did set my multi-column count, back to the default one column display, and I've got some additional pagers. So show details or hide details. This is the pager sizes, okay, where I can specify that I want to show 25 or 10. Okay, and you can actually customize the sizes for that control. You can also customize the text. If you don't like show details, hide details, or this text, you can customize all of that. But I simply just added these controls to get their effect. So more rows is just, appending on some more rows. Okay? Okay. Now, one other pager that is quite intriguing is pager save state. And let's see how this view operates without it. So if I go to page 4 and I, expand a couple of these rows, and then I open up Western Hills Golf on page 4, and then return to my view, I'm returned to page 1. Now, there are workarounds that have been developed for this using scoped variables, session scoped variables, and so on, but it's a lot of work. What the pager save state does is do all that work for you. Oh, looks like I already added it. I just missed. Okay, well, let me re-add it. Okay, so pager save state, I'll drag that into one of my pager facet areas. And let's save and see the impact of that. Okay, so you're not actually seeing anything here, but once again, let me expand a couple of things on page 1, and then go to page 4, and maybe expand a couple of these rows, and then open up this particular document. And when I return to the view, I'm returned to page 4 with just those rows expanded as I left them, and on page 1, just those rows expanded. So pager save state is doing quite a lot here. Now, there's a wee bit more to it, and that is, what's happening here. So there are two parts to setting this up. On your XPage, that's rendering your data view panel. And by the way, the pager save state works with your regular view core view controls as well. But anyway, on your view panel, you add your pager save state control. On your XPage that's displaying your document, any control that's navigating back to the view, what you want to do there is you want to specify that you want to restore the state of your view. So there's a view state bean, and you simply set the restore state property to true for that. So it's one line of code, but has to do it for this to work. We're not going to get into that. I want to go on to some other techniques. But do check out those pager controls. There's some really nice pager controls, and particularly that pager save state control, which really does address kind of a quirky initial operation, and it provides some view state for you. Okay, data view also supports categorized columns, which is what we're seeing here. There are two ways to set up categorized columns. One is through the complex property category column, so just like your extra columns, you can add one or several category columns. And the other approach is through this facet, category row facet. So you would typically do one or the other. In fact, I would suggest you do one or the other. In some cases, when you have an option in your application layout, when there's an option for adding a search property or adding a search facet, the facet will override. But in this case here, you just get mixed results. So you would do one or the other. And let's take a look at that. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at the design of this demo XPage 532 view, and it has a data view control on it. doesn't have anything in the category row facet. When I preview this, I am seeing some expandable categories. Okay, and I think this loaded up at showing 2 levels. So expand level was set to 2 by default on this. Also seeing the use of this collapse all, expand all pager as well. Okay, so that's where you would use it on a category column. So let's take a look at the design. Wasn't done here, okay, but I can go into the all properties for my data view, and in that format area, here's where 2 category columns were added, one to display the region, column name is region, and one to display the type. So very simple to add, just as you would add extra columns. Okay, a little bit more detail on that details facet. This may not be obvious, but that detail facet is a very powerful tool. Basically, it's a data view panel, so it's a control to render your domino views with a built-in repeat. Okay, that's how it operates, but just so much more easier to use. So if I compare it to the repeat, certainly from a data source point of view, it's very specialized. It's only for your domino view data source, the same one that is used, as the data source for your domino or for your data view. But after that, it's just so much easier to use because you can use the var variable that you've set up for your data view, as a way to access each entry in your repeat. Okay, so each repeated entry in your domino view data source. So very nice to use, and this is an application of in-view editing. Okay, using that detail facet. And here's a couple of applications of using the detail facet. Now these are, what I would call single page applications for the data view. So what's happened here is, there is no link to open up the underlying document. In this application, it's an information-only application. We just want to display a lot of information about this particular customer. So that's what we're doing here. And multi-column count was set to 3 for this example. In this example here, the detail facet, well, it's doing the same thing as before. It's showing the address for the customer, but it's also showing the orders for the customer. And what's interesting about that particular example is the orders are not in the customer's application, which is the data source for my data view. It's in that other application, the sales application. So that's kind of an interesting use of the repeat. And I'm just going to demonstrate a couple of these. Okay, so this demo X page 543, in its detail facet, it has a computed field to show the address information as we saw before. But it's got, another one to show some contact information, and this link, which is coded to show the dialog 1 component, which is also defined within the detail facet, within my repeat from my data view control. Okay, so I've got a dialog control here, and into that dialog, we've got input controls to display and edit the contact information, phone information. We've got button controls to close the dialog, and so on. So let me just demonstrate this. And that's what we're seeing here. Okay, so that's my dialog control. And if I wanted to change the phone number and save that, and I'm seeing that effect. So in-view editing using a dialog control. And let me just run the next demo right from here. Looks like the same X page, but this is the demo 544 view X page. And on this one, again, in view editing, but a different control here. Okay, this is a tooltip control with a tool. Actually, this is a tooltip dialog control. Am I tooltip? Am I dialog? Anyway, it's a dialog control with this little interface to indicate, what it's for. It's actually for this one here, and it's non-modal. So I can, open up this tooltip, or I can click anywhere else to close the tooltip. Okay, so different interface. And one more in-view editing example. Looks like the same XPage again. This is the 545 example. And this time, in-view editing is delivered using an in-place form control. So all controls available through the Extension Library or Upgrade Pack 1. Okay, one very powerful use of that built-in repeat. Okay, so let's take a look at some other examples. Okay, I want to take a look at these two examples and notice that, demo XPage 551 doesn't have a corresponding, set of input and view XPages. So all of this application is delivered in a single XPage. And let me just preview this and see the effect. And this is a read-only application, okay, where I'm seeing everything that I need to see. I can't actually click to open the underlying document. So read-only application, so one use of the built-in repeat provided by the detail facet. And for this one here, the summary column has been coded not to open up the document, but to actually, expand or collapse the row, to toggle the detail row. And this is that example where, we're going outside of the Domino view data source, the customer by name view in the customer application, to do a DB lookup to return the orders for that customer. So very, very quickly, let's just see how that was done. Okay. Computed field 2 returns object data 1. Okay, well, what's that? Well, somewhere in here, there's going to be a panel with another data source defined. And I think I got it. Yes, that's the one with the data source. Okay, so I've got a containing panel that has computed field 1 that shows the address information and computed field 2 that shows the orders for that customer. And on the data panel, I see object data 1 defined. So the extension library, in addition to your Domino view and Domino document data sources, you can also define your own object data source. And basically the way you do that, and I've lost it. Let me see if I can pick it up again. Ah, there we go. Is you create an object, and here you can do whatever you want to return an option. I want to return the orders for the customer in that view entry. So view entry, get column value customer, and then passing that into a DB lookup, okay, to the sales database, and passing the name of the view that I want to look up, sales order by customer, and the customer name for that view entry, and returning column 2, which would be orders. Okay? And if no orders are found for that customer, I return no orders for customer. Okay. I'm going to go on. And we're going to take a look at the application layout control. Okay, so nice thing about the application layout control is that it provides some structure, okay, and we're all kind of used to that. When you develop a notes application, you didn't have to worry about, you just created forms and views, and And all of the views that you created or folders, they would automatically appear in that left-hand Folders and Navigator. And if you added action buttons to a view, they would appear in the action bar. If you added action buttons to a form, they would appear in the action bar in your form design. So the structure, was already there. Nice thing about developing with XPages is, you can do whatever you want. But then again, without that structure, it takes a long time to develop an application layout that you can use over and over again. So that is the purpose of the application layout control. It has 6 facet areas, a left column facet, main content area, and a right column facet. And there's also a header and footer facet. And what we're seeing here in this image is just a bunch of labels added in to show the various areas of your application design framework or your application layout design framework. There are 5 bar areas, like the banner bar, where you can add in a logo, where you can add in application links and utility links for maybe logging in or showing the current logged in name. There's a title bar control, where you can add title bar tabs to navigate typically to one or another application. And tied into that, at least visually, is this other bar, the place bar. So visually, it looks like these place bar actions or buttons are related to this particular tab, this application. Okay, that's how you would set that up. And then there's also an area for footer links and for legal text as well. And this screen is simply showing what this looks like in Designer. Okay, so same XPage, with all of those, with labels in all of those facet areas. And then to define, those various other things like tabs, then you would interact with the various tabs in your properties for your application layout, like banner, where you can add a logo and so on. So let's take a look at that in Design. Okay, and this is that XPage, and we just see a whole bunch of labels that have been added into the various facets. First a panel was added, and then a label. And then to set the tabs, let me preview this. To set things like, let me preview just a little bit less of this. Okay, to set things like the logo, you do that on the Banner tab. Okay, that's where logo is specified, some alternate text. For the application links, you define those on the Application Link tabs. Now, one concept we didn't cover, this we cover in Module 6 in our course, is the concept of tree nodes. So there are 11 types of tree nodes. There are things like basic leaf nodes, where you can define the node and define its functionality, if you will, from scratch. But then there are some specialized nodes like user node for specifying their username, or the login logout node to specify or to basically add a login logout toggle. Now those you would typically add into your application links area. So the thing about OneUI design is, each one of these areas does have a one purpose, a OneUI purpose. So your application links is where the user would typically look for their name, and if they haven't logged in, a login link. Okay, and that's where you would define. Okay, so you're adding nodes into these various areas to basically create the functionality, and depending on what you want to add, you add a different type of node. So there are also nodes for things like view or folder list node. If you wanted to return all of the views or folders or just the views from a particular database. or the viewer folder entry. So if you want to return into your tabs or wherever, you wanted to return just the view entries for a specified view. Okay, so different nodes for different purposes. Okay. Title bar is where you add these title bar tabs. Okay, so you can add some title text that's appearing here, and then to add the tabs, you would add in one or another, well, you'd add in one node for each tab you wanted to create. Now, typically, the type of node you would create here is a page link node to open up a specified page. We're going to see that in a moment. Place bar. Okay, so we can see 3 basic nodes were added with labels just to show, where they're going to show up. Now, footer. Let me scroll down. Okay, and we see a couple of footer links and some legal text. Okay, so footer. Now this was first a container node was added, and then some basic leaf nodes, just simply to show a couple of links. Typically you would code these links, where to go when they're clicked on. And then legal text. Okay. Back to the presentation very quickly, and I'm told I'm running out of time here, so we are going to go a little over. So if you're finding this interesting, we will continue and go beyond 12 noon. But anyway, for this chart is basically showing that the application layout control does use the OneUI themes, and specifically the OneUI version 2.1 themes. So you must specify in the application, in the database, one of those OneUI themes. And you do that in the application properties or in the XSP properties. And I've got a demonstration of that. And another application here. Now this is another database which has a bunch of themes defined. So some new themes were created. So we have this green theme. And I can see that this green theme extends the OneUI 2.1_green theme. Okay? So if you're going to use an application layout, which I do in this XPage, okay, I'm going to preview this. It must be using one of those themes. This is the default theme, and what we have here is a navigator control to specify one or the other themes and switch to one of the other themes. That's what Gen 1 looks like: gold, green, onyx, and so on. Silver, that looks pretty good. Now, if I select the web standard theme, wow, things just got out of whack. So my application layout control must be in a database that's using one of the OneUI version 2.1 themes, or a theme that extends one of the OneUI 2.1 themes. Okay, a couple of charts. How do you create an application layout control? Well, first of all, you do it on a custom control. You want an application layout that you're going to use over and over and over again on several X pages, maybe across several applications as well. Go through the tabs to specify, any title bar tabs, a logo, and so on. And this is an important step. For every one of those facet areas, there are 6 facet areas. For every one of those facet areas that you want to add content to when this custom control is added to the X page, you must add into that facet area, that editable area, an editable area control. Otherwise, you won't be able to add any content once this custom control is added into the X page. So you would do that for each of your 6 facet areas, even if you're never going to use them. In fact, what we recommend is that You add an editable area control into all 6 areas, even if you'll never use the masked header area. As long as it's unused, as long as you don't add anything into that on the X page that is using this custom control, no space is consumed, nothing is rendered, okay? And in fact, we even recommend some default naming conventions, and that's just something that's a good idea, particularly if there's multiple developers, you know, adds to reusability of your code and so on. Now, another step when you're designing your application layout is to pass information from the X page that's going to use that custom control, that's going to include that custom control. You need to pass information from the X page back to the custom control. And the facility to do that is the custom control property, the property definition, where you would add a property like the navigation path property, okay? And then somewhere in your application layout, there is a navigation path property, and it has a very specialized purpose. It receives, you know, for the rendered X page, you know, its identity or path within the overall application navigation. And we'll see that when we set this up. And here's an example of how it's used, and we're seeing an application layout that has a banner. You know, it's got a user node showing the current login name. Haven't logged in yet, so it also has a login tree node to enable the user to log in. Title bar, 3 tabs to navigate to the various applications. There are 3 applications that they can navigate to. And in the left column facet, there's a navigator to open up a particular view, sales by region, sales by customer, and so on. So just want to talk about that navigation path property, very important property. And the facility for doing that is you define some property in your custom control, and then in the X page that uses that custom control with your application layout, you set that property, okay? And in this case, you're setting some sort of a string indicating where this X page fits into the overall navigation path for this application. So that's passed back to the navigation path property. And then where you use that is typically in your title bar tabs, and you specify a selection property for each of your page link nodes to indicate a regular expression to match all of the X pages that this tab should show as selected. So let's just see how that's done. So we have 2 X pages, one that's showing the customer by name view and a data view, one that's showing the customer by region view, and one for creating a new customer document. And each one of these has a navigation path like /SM sales and marketing /customer /customer by name view. This one sets its navigation path to something similar, SM customers customer by region view. And this tab has a selection property that is a regular expression to match these 2 X pages, okay? /SM /customers dot star to indicate anything after that, okay? So this particular tab will show as highlighted, you know, when either of those X pages is rendered. Okay, let me show you the design of this. Howard, can you pipe in here?
And what do you want me to pipe in with, Paul?
You know, I'm just wondering how I'm doing on time.
We're going to have to start to wrap it up. Why don't you show them what you're working on and do a quick demo of the different possibilities of working with the application layout control so we can have time for a couple questions.
Okay, let me show you. Okay, here's an application layout design that's showing the various views in my customer by name view and my sales application and my parts application. And this is all done with a accordion control in my left panel, not using any tabs or place bars or anything like that. Okay, here's another design. And this one is showing tabs to navigate to my various applications. And then I've got a link, to switch to my various views within that customer application and so on. So this is maximizing this area. There's no space used in a left column facet. Okay, we're just using the main content area. And this one here, okay, this one here has tabs to navigate to my various applications, but this uses the left column, and there's a navigator to go to the various views, my parts application and customers and so on. Now, I'm going to recreate this very, very quickly. And I'm going to create something, get a new custom control called WR App Layout. Okay, so creating a new custom control, and the first thing I need to do is add in my application layout. I can check off here, or exclude certain areas. I'm not going to use a place bar or a footer. And let me resize this, and also resize this. Okay, so I want a logo, and I want 3 tabs. So here in the logo, I can select one of the image resources in this database for my logo. Not using any application links, but I do have these utility links that I want to recreate. So I'm going to add in a user node and just clear the default label to get anonymous when not logged in. I'm going to add in a login logout node, so that's a toggle node, going to clear the default login1 label to get the default login when not logged in or logout. Okay, so that's how easy it is. On the title bar, I want 3 title bar tabs. Okay. I might say just add some text here for a title. Okay. And Howard, did you want to field questions while I just continued designing this? Okay, so I'm going to add...
Oh, let's just, why don't you go ahead and wrap up, just add a few more things, and let's wrap up, and we'll go to the questions.
Okay, so we're going to add in the customer application tab. And that was added as a page link node, and the page that I want to open, I've pre-built some pages here. These pages currently are blank, so I'm going to add in the customer by name view page. Okay, and let me save that. And now let me add my custom control to that X page. Okay, so here is the X page WR for custom by name view. Blank X page right now, so I'm going to add in the custom control that I just created, WR4 app layout. Oh, WR app layout, that'll do. Oh, what's happening here? Right, I'm not getting any editable areas. Okay, so that's one thing that I failed to do. Okay, so let me not save that change. I need to enable all of these editable areas. So into each of these, I'm not sure if I forgot to do it, if I want to do it on purpose, but into each of these I would add in an editable area to enable that. So into the left column area, I would add an editable area, and by convention, I would call it left column, and give it a facet name of left column. Okay, now that would be enabled on my XPage where I use this custom control. Now, for time, I'm just going to borrow all of this from another design. So I'm just going to select all of these editable areas in the facets from that design, and then just overwrite. Okay, so all of those are defined. I just need one here in the main area, and for that one, I'm not going to give it a facet name because I want to allow for the inclusion of multiple components. So now back into my XPage design. Let me re-add that custom control. Okay, now I've got those editable areas. And I already have a navigator to navigate to the various views, so I'll just drag that in. That's a custom control that's been defined. And I already have a navigator for the customer by name view, or sorry, a custom control that has a data view for the customer by name view, so I'll just drag that into the middle area. And when I preview this, okay, that's what I'm getting so far. Okay, so I am getting my customer by name view. I'm getting that navigator in the left-hand column. I have one tab defined. I've got my banner with my logo, anonymous, haven't logged in yet, and so on. Okay, so I would just kind of repeat that. Okay. For this one here, for my customer by region view. And bear with me, I just want to go through one cycle here. There's an important navigation part. Okay, so I'm going to drag in the application layout that I defined. Also going to drag in the custom control that has my view navigator for my customer views. And this time drag in the custom control for my by region view, which has a data view defined on it. Okay, and I can save that and refresh. And now when I select customer by region, okay, it is displaying my customers by region or customers by name, but here's the difference. My tab only shows us selected, my customers application tab only shows us selected when the customer by name view is selected and not the by region. Okay, and the reason for that is, I need to define, if you will, a family of XPages, that belong to this particular tab. And the facility for doing that is in your application layout control. You want to pass information from an XPage back to the custom control on the XPage. In your custom control properties, you add a property definition. I'm going to add a new property, I'm going to call it navigation path. Probably want to make that a required property, probably want every X page to identify itself, identify its navigation path. And then where you use that is in the application layout control, in the all properties, under configuration, one of the properties is navigation path. And to that, I'm simply going to return that property. Okay, composite data, the map of all of the custom properties that I've added to this custom control. So I'll just return that. Okay, and I now have two errors. Right, I didn't have any errors before, but basically this required property navigation path is not set on these two resources. So back in those X pages that use this custom control, I'll go into the custom properties and set the navigation path. And for these two, they're both part of the SM customers path. And this one is cust by name view. Let me just copy that. And I will save that. And one of my errors went away because that property was set. That required property was set. And on this one here, I'll set its navigation path. Okay, and I'll save that. My other problem went away. And how do I consume that? Okay, how do I get that effect where, you know, when this customer by region X page is rendered, this is also selected, this particular tab? Well, for this tab where it's defined in the title bars, I go to the selection property and define a regular expression through the wizard. I'm just going to paste it in, what I had in my clipboard. Basically a regular expression, you know, that will match all of the X pages that are part of this navigation path. Okay, so that should match for both of my X pages. And I can go to the next tab to test that out. Nice wizard if you haven't used it, but I think it's going to work for me, so I'll save that. And I'm going to refresh. And that's looking good already. When I select customer name, my customer application tab is selected. When I select customer region, that's selected as well. And that's basically it.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Well, I think if you turn control over to me, we'll get ready for a couple of minutes of Q&A. So I think everyone can see that what Paul showed, it's pretty powerful to build a great looking user interface just by using the application layout control and putting in building. You saw at the end how he just had some navigators ready to go in the left column, and those enabled him to quickly take all those bits and pieces in the custom controls and build his application. Okay, so just a few words if you're going to connect. Paul and I are speaking at 2 sessions. We do have a birds of a feather for those of you who are kind of interested in getting started with XPages and wondering what to learn, or even if you are experienced and want to share your experiences, we invite you to come on by. And we have a session on mobilizing your Notes and Domino apps using the mobile web controls. And then Teamstudio has a couple of their people talking about mobile development as well. One with, I think these might have gotten reversed in terms of the speakers, but they have one focusing just on the Unplugged product. And I know there were some questions about that in the Q&A. And there's also one on building your first mobile application using XPages that will be cover the landscape of different tools. Okay, so the Q&A, we do have a number of questions all ready to go. Let's see, we lost my Q&A pane. get that back. Paul, do you, actually we had one that I think Dan wants to answer on Unplugged. You want to take that one first, Dan?
There wasn't an inquiry with one of the attendees that is experiencing some refresh issues with Unplugged and was wondering how to remedy that. So I believe that was Akiyuki, and I can address that offline. That was the note.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Dan. Sorry, I didn't see the chat completely. Okay. Had a question. There are a couple questions about the extension library versus the Upgrade Pack 1 and people concerned about adding it to their server. The extension library was and still is being developed by IBM developers and the team of IBM employees. And while it is not officially IBM supported, it does have a lot of life to it. It's been around for since 2010, I think it first came out, and is very stable. I've not seen any problems. If you want, you can get the Upgrade Pack 1. You can do everything we've done today, but there's some other areas that you may not get into, that you may not be able to do if you don't have the extension library. We do point those out in our course, but everything we did today you could do with the Upgrade Pack 1 that would be fully IBM supported. And I would assume all this will translate seamlessly to Notes and Domino 9 as you move your code over to the new platform. Paul, you got a question?
Yeah, question from Alexi regarding pager save state. Is that only for the current session, or is there any way to save the state, for the next login, across the session? No. That is only for the current session. You can't do that with the just with the pager save state. You'd have to go into application scope or profile documents or something like that if you wanted to do that. And that would require quite a lot of coding now that I think about it. So the answer is no to that.
Okay, thanks, Paul. We got a question from Milland, and he wants to know if there's an address book picker similar to what's in the Lotus Notes client. And yes, there is the name picker that's in the extension library that you can choose to pick names from public directories, Domino views, or if the application was running locally as XPages in the Notes client, XPink, you could pick from the private address book as well.
Okay, question from Jan Villain, and wow, I just showed that. Oh, here it is. Are the OneUI 2.1 themes, are they default and available in the 853 download? Yes, they are all part of 853. So, and I'm not sure where we got 2.1. That might have been 853. But anyway, certainly you have the OneUI themes, the OneUI 2.0 themes, and the 2.1 themes that are all part of your core 853 product.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I had a question from Jessica when I kind of showed briefly, it wasn't necessarily related to the form table, but there was a quick way from using the data palette and dragging fields over. I guess you would like to do that without adding a cell for the table, and there is no way to do that. You would just add an edit box or whatever control you want and bind it to your data, because that's basically what you would be doing then anyway. You wouldn't have a need to drag it over from the data table. Dragging over from the data table does build or the data palette does build a nice table that you would use.
Question from Dan. I've used an earlier version of the application layout. If I upgrade to 9, will I have to remap everything? Not too certain about that. I don't think there's going to be a lot of changes if you were working with an application layout in 853. We have been testing many of our demos in release 9 beta, so we haven't seen anything break yet. I can't comment if you're using an application layout from earlier than 853.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Question from Lisa, can we add pictures to views if there's a picture on the document? And there is, I believe, an icon column in the data view that you could reach into your document and compute the URL to that particular image on the document. So that should be something that would be fairly easily done.
Okay, thanks, Howard. Question from Mikhail. In the OneUI layout, what's the use of the masked header and masked footer? Whether or not you use them is up to you. I haven't found a use for masked header. It displays above your application layout, so I really haven't found a use for that. For masked footer, the way we use it is in our demos and activities, and you may have seen this when I was demonstrating some XPages, but we use that as kind of a debug area. So I might drop in a dump object to dump one or another component into that masked footer area. And probably what you would want to do, for that type of application is based on a role, like I'm in the developer role. That's why I see what's in the debug panel in the masked footer. But that's one way you might use it.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Another question from Peter is validation work on the detailed dialog that Paul showed. And yes, of course, you can turn on validation and when you're using the various types of dialogs, whether it's a dialog control or in-place form or a tooltip.
Okay, question from Mikhail. How do you create a dynamic placebar button depending on which tab is visible in the OneUI layout? That's a very good question. Basically, you would define all of your placebar buttons for all of your tabs, and then based on some condition, and a good condition is navigation path, you would render one or another button or set of buttons. Okay, so once again, you're coding either the rendered property or the loaded property, depending on the application.
Okay, thanks, Paul. There's some questions about sorting with categorized views. So, the view, various ways to display a view in XPages kind of rely on the underlying view. So whatever you can do in the underlying view, you could do. What I've done when I needed to control the sorting a bit better is read the view in code and then build an array or some other type of JavaScript, Java object, and pass that to either a repeat control or to a view control that displays that data. And that way I do my sorting in the Java or JavaScript code. And that way you have a lot more control over how things are sorted, especially when you're categorizing it, and it can get a little flaky when you try to have a sort column as well as the categorized columns.
Okay, question from Jay. Understanding Facet terminology is obviously key to using these tools. I've heard Facet and editable area and callback interchangeably. Can you put some scope on these definitions? So, yeah, I use them interchangeably because they kind of are the same thing. Technically, in your design, in your custom control design, where you're adding in an editable area, it's referred to as a callback. And in fact, the tag is XP:_callback. When it's rendered on the X page where you're using it, typically it will have a facet name, an addressable area. So when it's rendered on the X page, it's typically referred to facet, but really it's all the same thing. It's an editable design area, that you're adding to your custom control, so that when that custom control or control, okay, like your data view control or your form table control, when that control is added to your X page, you can add content into that editable area.
All right, thanks, Paul. I think we'll just do two more questions. We have one from Abby, and when Paul did the details, I assume that she's referring to when you had the order details where you showed the information from the orders database, even though the view was from the customers, can you also edit that? And it's, yeah, sure, XPages has that flexibility. You could make those editable input areas and allow, you know, the data to be changed that way, right in the view. So that's the great thing about XPages, is you have that flexibility to basically do anything you want. Paul, why don't you take one more question?
Question from Manish. Does Notes 9 support data binding to relational databases? No, that's not going to be rolled into the Notes 9 product. Okay, so what we're seeing rolled into the Notes 9 product is effectively all of the controls available through Upgrade Pack 1, plus a few more. Okay, and you know, not part of that are the relational database binding controls. Okay, well, I think at that we're gonna. I know we went way over, and I appreciate everyone's patience. Those of you who hung in there. So, Talene, do you want to say any final words, or?
Just that, you know, to reiterate that we will be at IBM Connect and that we're looking forward to meeting everyone and showing you, you know, our product as well and how XPages fits into it and what you can do with it. So, come see us at booth B36 and 37, and we look forward to also hearing your and Paul's speaking pieces at IBM Connect. So. With that, thank you for attending. We will be sending out an email with a link to all the materials, so you can stay tuned for that. And as Howard mentioned, there are several other TLCC courses that you can look into, and please also visit teamstudio.com to learn more about us. So thank you for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day and evening. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.